only realized someone was inside the house when I saw the shadow in the hallway. Until that very second, I was utterly convinced this would be just another quick inspection, like so many others I'd done throughout my years in this line of work. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that would leave me questioning what I saw. But that shadow, it didn't move the way shadows should. It stood there, perfectly still, yet somehow, it felt like it was watching me, even though I couldn't make out a face, couldn't see any features at all. Just this dark silhouette that seemed to have a presence, a weight to it that made my skin crawl. I need to explain this from the beginning, otherwise none of this will make sense. Otherwise, you'll think I'm just another person jumping to conclusions in an empty house. I work inspecting properties that have been closed up for long stretches of time, sometimes months, sometimes even years. Empty houses attract problems like magnets attract metal. It's just the way it is. Squatters, leaks, structural damage, animals making nests in the walls. The real estate company would send me in to document everything, take photographs, check for water infiltration, unauthorized entry, raccoons in the attic, all those tedious but necessary things. Nothing exciting, nothing that would make for a good story at dinner. Most of the time, it was just the overwhelming smell of mildew and the sad sight of dead cockroaches scattered across warped floorboards. This particular house already had a strange reputation among the neighbors. The kind of whispered stories that people share over fences and in grocery store parking lots. People said nobody stayed there longer than 2 days. Some claimed it was because of excessive humidity that seemed to seep into your bones. Others mentioned a heaviness that pressed down on the walls at night, whatever that was supposed to mean. I never gave those stories any credibility. What truly haunts houses is living people. That's the truth. I've learned that lesson time and time again. I arrived there in the late afternoon, the light rain falling. The sky wearing that peculiar yellowish hue that comes just before nightfall settles in completely. The house appeared motionless, devoid of any movement whatsoever. But it didn't have that forgotten look that abandoned places usually carry. There was something attentive about it, something alert, like when you walk into a room where someone had just been moments before and left in a hurry leaving. Behind the warmth of their presence and an inexplicable tension in the air, I entered through the back because the front door was jammed tight, probably swollen from moisture. The first thing that bothered me, that set off alarm bells in my mind, was the smell. It wasn't mildew. It wasn't old wood. It wasn't the dusty scent of neglect. It was warm, unmistakably human. The smell of someone who sleeps in poorly ventilated spaces. You know, that denser air, that accumulated staleness that clings to everything. I recognized it immediately because I'd walked into irregularly occupied houses several times before in my career. But there was no sign of any of that. Nothing broken, nothing out of place. No windows pried open or shattered. Everything appeared disturbingly orderly. I was sweeping my flashlight beam across the living room when I heard the sound. A light dragging across the floor, like someone's soul trying desperately not to draw attention, trying to remain unnoticed. I froze, literally stopped breathing for a full second, my chest tight, my heart suddenly pounding in my ears. I called out, halfway automatic, because it's what you do in these moments. Is someone there? Nobody answered. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. I took a few cautious steps toward the hallway, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The beam hit the floor near the front bedroom door. And that's when the shadow appeared. Have you ever felt that something is watching you, even when you can't see anyone's face, anyone's human form, but you know with every fiber of your being that you're not alone? It wasn't mine. It couldn't possibly be mine. I was standing at an angle and this shadow came straight out from the bedroom doorway, well-defined and solid against the wall. And the worst part, the part that made my blood run cold, was that it moved as if it were breathing. I could see the shoulder rising and falling against the wallpaper, a slow, rhythmic motion that mimicked human respiration. That single observation destroyed every logical explanation I was desperately trying to construct in my mind. Tree shadows don't breathe. Furniture shadows don't move with that kind of organic fluidity. This was something else entirely. Share in the comments a statement that begins with, I recognize, ... about a moment when you felt a presence you couldn't explain. When your rational mind struggled against what your instincts were screaming at you. Because acknowledging these moments, giving voice to these experiences that live in the spaces between logic and instinct, helps us understand that we're not alone in confronting the inexplicable. Your truth matters, and sometimes speaking it aloud is the first step toward making sense of what we've witnessed. I took 2 steps backward without taking my eyes off that shadow, my body moving on pure instinct. I retreated to the kitchen, grabbed a piece of wooden handle that was leaning near the sink, probably from an old broom or mop. It wouldn't do any good against anything real. I knew that, but I needed to feel like I had something to hold on to, something solid in my hands. When I returned to the hallway, my makeshift weapon gripped tight. The shadow had vanished completely. The bedroom door was now pulled, almost closed. The doorknob was covered in grease, the kind that comes from handprints, from human touch. I hadn't touched it. I knew I hadn't touched it. I pushed the door open slowly and heard a muffled sound, like someone holding their breath or shifting position quickly, trying hard not to be noticed but failing. I aimed the flashlight beam inside. The bedroom appeared empty, completely vacant, but the wardrobe stood slightly ajar, and I heard fabric creaking from within, like someone crouched inside, shifting their knee against the wooden interior. My stomach turned over. I got out of there fast, not quite running, but moving with purpose. I made it back to the living room, trying desperately not to spiral into full panic. That's when I noticed the chair. It was positioned in the center of the living room, facing the door directly, without a single speck of dust on its surface. Everything in that room was blanketed with dust, a thick layer that spoke of months of neglect, except for that chair. And on the floor beside it sat a plate with food eaten halfway, as if someone had been sitting there having a meal just hours before. The house had been officially abandoned by the real estate company for months. I started moving slowly toward the exit, trying to keep my eyes on the dark corners, on the spaces where shadows gathered. My mind was made up. I was getting out and calling the police because clearly someone was using this place, squatting illegally, and that was their problem to handle, not mine. But then came the sound from upstairs. One footstep, then another, then another. Slow, deliberately slow, like someone distributing their body weight carefully to avoid revealing their exact location, to avoid making those telltale creaks that old floorboards always make. I spoke loudly, my voice stronger than I felt. I know someone's up there. Nothing. Only that crushing silence that feels alive, that seems to press against your ear. The silence that followed was worse than the footsteps themselves, because no silence becomes that absolutely quiet, unless someone is deliberately holding their breath, controlling every tiny sound their body might make. I climbed those stairs anyway, against every instinct screaming at me to turn around and leave. Each step produced a creak that seemed impossibly loud in that suffocating stillness, announcing my presence with each movement upward. Up there, the air felt warm, different, thick with recent human occupation, as if many people had filled that floor not long ago, their presence still lingering in the atmosphere like invisible fingerprints on everything. The door to the larger bedroom stood open, and when I illuminated the interior with my flashlight beam, I understood everything in an instant. Nothing supernatural, nothing requiring superstition or belief in the paranormal to explain. There was a blanket spread across the floor, several bottles of water lined up against the baseboard, clothes folded with surprising care, food hidden in a corner like precious cargo, and a backpack leaning partially open against the wall. The house wasn't abandoned at all. It was being used, actively inhabited, used by someone who understood that nobody would ever dare enter here because of the house's dark reputation, because of all those whispered stories that kept curious people away better than any lock ever could. And that's when I heard movement directly behind me, close enough to make my skin prickle with awareness. I turned around instantly, my body moving on pure adrenaline. A man stood in the hallway, leaning casually against the wall, staring at me in a way I'd never experienced before in all my years doing this work. It wasn't threatening, not exactly, and it wasn't startled surprise either. It was something far more unsettling. He looked at me as if I were the intruder, as if I were the problem disrupting his carefully constructed world. He didn't speak a single word, and neither did I. We just stood there in this strange standoff, the beam of my flashlight cutting between us. I remained frozen in place, gripping that piece of wooden handle as if it offered genuine protection against whatever might happen next. The man didn't appear armed, didn't seem intoxicated, didn't look lost or confused. He was just far too aware, far too present in that moment. His gaze carried a clear warning that needed no words to communicate its message. His beard was thick and unkempt, his hair dirty and matted, but his eyes remained wide open, intensely alert, tracking my every micro-movement. There was no mistaking this for someone who happened to be sleeping there by accident or circumstance. He saw me as someone who had invaded his space, violated his sanctuary, and that shifted the entire dynamic of our encounter in ways that made my blood run cold. I took one step backward, testing his reaction. He took a step too, but not toward me. He moved sideways, positioning himself so that he could keep me constantly in front of him, never behind, never out of his direct line of sight. That synchronization sent a jolt of fear through my system because it revealed something crucial. This wasn't improvisation or panic on his part. This house was their territory, and they knew every inch of it, intimately. Have you considered how it feels to be in a space that you believe is empty, and discover that other eyes have been watching your every movement since you entered? That every step you took was noticed? ... I said something in a low tone, just trying to break the unbearable tension filling that narrow corridor. Easy now? I'm just doing an inspection. I don't want any trouble. He didn't respond with words, but his breathing pattern changed noticeably. It became shorter, more rapid, more controlled. It wasn't fear driving that change. It was calculation, cold assessment, as if he were measuring exactly what to do with me, weighing his options with frightening clarity. The corridor was narrow, claustrophobic. If I tried to run for the stairs, and he came after me, I'd lose that racistly, probably before I made it halfway down. If I attempted to retreat into the bedroom, I'd become trapped, cornered with no escape route. So I decided to descend slowly, taking it one careful step at a time, keeping him always within range of my flashlight beam so I'd know if he moved. Leave in the comments your reflection beginning with, I commit. 2... double quotes about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. When every fiber of your being tells you that you're not safe, even though you can't articulate exactly why. Because learning to honor those internal warnings, those ancient survival mechanisms that operate below conscious thought, might be the difference between walking away safely and becoming another tragic story. Your commitment to self-preservation and awareness could inspire someone else to listen to that inner voice when they need it most. On my first downward movement, he pressed his hand more firmly against the wall, a gesture that seemed designed to signal someone discreetly. And he did signal, because when I descended the second step, I heard another sound from the upper floor, coming from deeper in the hallway. Footsteps, lighter than his, but definitely not a child. The weight distribution, the cadence, everything indicated an adult moving with practiced stealth. My heart started pounding so violently that I genuinely thought they would hear it echoing in that enclosed space, broadcasting my terror. I descended slowly, trying to maintain composure while subtly increasing my pace. When I reached the middle of the staircase, I turned my flashlight beam slightly upward for just a moment. The man remained there, completely motionless, like a statue. But now behind him stood a smaller silhouette that hadn't been there before. I couldn't make out facial features, only the basic shape and outline. It appeared to be someone thinner, standing perfectly still, shoulders slightly tilted against the bedroom door frame in a pose that suggested patient waiting. They were two people now, at minimum, and clearly accustomed to remaining hidden, to existing in the shadows of places people feared to enter. The older man took one deliberate step forward. The thinner figure receded slightly into darkness. They seemed to have some kind of silent signal system between them, as if they divided functions and responsibilities without needing to speak a single word, operating with the efficiency of long practice. When I finally reached the last step, I kept that wooden handle positioned in front of my body, not raised threateningly, just held ready. If I showed too much fear, I became a target, prey for predators who could sense vulnerability. If I displayed too much false courage, I might provoke an attack I couldn't handle. I walked backward toward the living room, never turning my back on the staircase. The larger man came to stand at the top of the stairs, a dark silhouette framed against the lighter wall behind him. He didn't descend, didn't pursue, but he remained there observing my every step with that same unsettling intensity. In the living room, that dust-free chair seemed even more out of place now, more significant. The half-eaten plate of food, too. It was as if I was stepping through something deeply intimate and private, violating their carefully constructed hidden life. And I'm certain they perceived the exact moment when understanding dawned on me. when all the pieces fell into place. They lived here, survived here in secret. They knew that the house's haunted reputation kept everyone away more effectively than locks or alarms ever could. They knew that nobody would want to investigate strange noises in a house known for being cursed or possessed, and they exploited that fear brilliantly. I needed to exit without appearing to flee, without triggering whatever instinct might make them decide I was too much of a threat to let leave. So I made the slowest, most deliberate movement of my entire life. I walked toward the back door, each step measured and controlled, fighting every impulse to break into a run. With every footfall, I felt his gaze burning into my back, like physical weight pressing between my shoulder blades. The flashlight trembled slightly in my hand, despite my efforts to keep it steady, betraying the fear coursing through my veins. When I finally reached the door, I opened it with excruciating slowness, refusing to turn my back completely on them, keeping my body angled so I could maintain some awareness of the space behind me. Only after stepping outside, only when my foot touched the overgrown grass of the backyard, did I allow myself to breathe deeply. The cool evening air filled my lungs like salvation. I could still hear footsteps inside the house, light and purposeful, as if they were reorganizing something after my descent, restoring their hidden world to its previous order now that the intruder had been expelled. In the backyard, I moved slowly toward the side gate, forcing myself not to run even though every muscle in my body screamed for escape. I began working the latch open, my fingers fumbling slightly with the rusted mechanism. But the sensation of being observed was so overwhelmingly strong that I had to look back toward the house. That's when I saw it, and my blood turned to ice. In the upstairs window, it wasn't the larger man, wasn't the thinner figure I'd seen before. This was another person entirely, a face I hadn't encountered during my time inside. The curtains hung partially closed, but I could see the contour perfectly, the outline of features watching me with disturbing clarity. The gaze wasn't one of curiosity or fear. For a brief second, I considered shouting for help, calling out to anyone who might hear, but the street remained completely empty, devoid of potential witnesses or assistance. And if I drew attention to myself, if I made noise or caused a scene, I had no idea how many of them were concealed inside that house, how many might come pouring out to silence me before anyone could respond. I opened the gate, stepped through into the narrow alley beyond, and closed it behind me without making a sound, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the simple action. I walked quickly toward my car, not quite running, but moving with urgent purpose. Only when I climbed inside and locked every door did my body finally allow itself to release the trembling I'd been suppressing. When I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror before pulling away from the curb. The upstairs windows stood empty now, but the curtains swayed gently, subtly, as if someone had just stepped back from view, retreating into the shadows where they felt most comfortable. Do you remember the last time you felt like you'd escaped something terrible for a very short time? When you looked back and told you about it when you were in real danger, ... I drove to the real estate office without thinking clearly, my mind replaying every moment of what had just happened. I needed to warn them, needed to report what I'd discovered, but I also knew that if I recounted everything exactly as I'd witnessed it, they would either laugh in my face, dismissing me as paranoid or unstable, or they'd send me back there with reinforcement with backup. And that was the absolute last thing I wanted. The thought of returning to that house, of facing those people again with their silent coordination and watchful eyes, filled me with a dread I couldn't articulate. I arrived at the supervisor's office, handed over the normal photographs I'd managed to take of the house's lower level before everything went wrong, and kept my report devastatingly basic. There are signs of unauthorized entry. Premedicide flatly. Better send someone to verify. The rest I didn't mention, couldn't bring myself to share. I lacked the courage to explain what I'd really seen, what I'd really felt in that place. Escribe en los comentarios una declaración que comience con "Yo acepto que", sobre los momentos en que el miedo te hizo callar, cuando deberías haber hablado, cuando guardaste la verdad, porque compartirla parecía más aterrador que mantenerla dentro. Because accepting our moments of silence, understanding why we sometimes choose self-preservation over complete honesty, helps us recognize our humanity and perhaps find the courage to speak up when it truly matters most. Late that afternoon, after I'd already submitted my abbreviated report and attempted to move forward with my day, pretending everything was normal, my phone rang with an unexpected call. The number belonged to the real estate company itself, but it wasn't my supervisor on the line. It was the owner, the man who ran the entire operation. He never called me directly, never had reason to contact individual inspectors. His voice came through short, direct, rushed, like someone dealing with urgent business. "I need you to go back there tomorrow morning," he said without preamble. The property owner wants clearer photographs of the upper floor, better documentation. I went completely silent for several seconds, my mind racing through possible responses. I tried to invent some excuse, any reasonable explanation for why I couldn't return, but nothing convincing emerged from my perilous thoughts. He simply continued, filling my silence with more pressure. "We need to deliver this property. We can't postpone any longer. The deal is hanging by a thread." I could have told him the truth right then. Could have explained that people were living there, that it was genuinely dangerous, that the problems had nothing to do with water infiltration or mold or electrical issues. But two things held me back from speaking. Two fears that tangled together in my mind. First, I knew that if they truly discovered people were hiding inside that house, they'd send me back there with someone from City Hall, from the police department, some official presence. And that meant returning to that place with those people watching me, knowing I'd betrayed their sanctuary, knowing I'd brought the authorities to displace them. And second, I didn't want those people thinking I had deliberately brought someone to remove them from their hiding place, because I genuinely had no idea what they were capable of when cornered, when their survival was threatened, and they knew who I was now. They'd seen my face, studied my movements. They knew I'd been there, and they knew I could return with others. That night I didn't sleep properly, couldn't quiet my racing mind enough to rest. Every time I closed my eyes trying to find peace in darkness, I remembered the shadow breathing in that hallway, the greasy doorknob, marked with human touch, the dust-free chair positioned to watch the entrance, and especially that third face in the window, the one that radiated authority and control. Morning came too quickly. I almost gave up on the entire thing, almost sent a message claiming illness or family emergency. But then came the thought that paralyzed me with new fear. What if they were expecting exactly that response? What if the worst possible decision was precisely to fail to show up, to break the unspoken understanding that seemed to exist between us? I ended up going against my will, against every screaming instinct. Driving back to that cursed house, because the fear of not going somehow exceeded the fear of returning. I arrived shortly after 8 in the morning, this time without rain falling, but with that strange wind that makes houses seem larger than they actually are, that carries sounds and creates movements where there shouldn't be any. I parked my car in the same spot as before. I sat there motionless for several long seconds, staring at the facade, studying every window and shadow. Nothing moved, no curtain shifted, no face appeared in the glass. But there was something new that made my stomach drop. The front door stood partially open, revealing a slice of darkness within. And that door never opened by itself. It jammed so badly that I'd given up trying to use it during my first visit. This discovery chilled me to my core. If they left it open like this, it was either an invitation, a warning, or simply a signal that they remained inside and no longer cared about hiding their presence. Maybe they wanted me to know they were there, waiting. I stepped out of my car but left the driver's door hanging open, unlocked and ready. I was going to be the idiot who secures everything and loses any potential escape route, when seconds might mean the difference between safety and something far worse. I walked slowly toward the front entrance, my footsteps crunching on the neglected pathway. The wood appeared swollen and water damaged, covered with marks and scratches from years of weather and neglect, but unmistakably open now. I didn't push through immediately. I stood there on the threshold, straining to hear anything from within, any sound that might tell me what waited inside. The entire house felt too silent, unnaturally quiet. It wasn't the silence of emptiness. This was the silence of occupied space, of people holding perfectly still, of breath being controlled and movements being suppressed. I entered with extreme caution, every sense heightened to maximum alertness. That human smell still lingered in the stale air, but weaker now, more dissipated. It reminded me of how a room smells after many people have occupied it for an extended period and then departed quickly, leaving behind only the ghost of their presence. The living room appeared unchanged at first glance. The chair remained positioned in the exact same location, still facing the door like a sentinel, but the plate that had been on the floor the one with half-eaten food that had proven someone's recent presence, had completely vanished. That detail made no sense, violated the logic of abandoned spaces. Plates don't disappear by themselves. Someone had taken it, removed the evidence, cleaned up their traces, and that meant they'd been here after I left, moving through these rooms in darkness, restoring their carefully maintained secret. Someone had returned there after I left, moved through those rooms in darkness, erasing evidence of their existence. I walked to the staircase and climbed slowly, paying meticulous attention to each step, listening for any sound that might warn me of what awaited above. The place stood utterly empty, devastatingly vacant. Nothing remained of the blankets, nothing of the water bottles, nothing of the carefully hidden food supplies. The backpack had vanished, as if it never existed. Even the marks on the floor, where things had rested, where bodies had slept, had been swept away with desperate thoroughness, as if someone had worked frantically to erase every trace of human presence. That hasty cleaning carried an obvious meaning that settled in my gut, like lead. They knew I would return, had anticipated this exact scenario, and they didn't want anyone else finding evidence of their sanctuary. They'd stripped the place bare, removed every shred of proof that people had lived here. Sore be bad, I felt something profoundly wrong in that absence. Something that went beyond simple fear. They'd rushed their departure, abandoned this shelter they'd clearly maintained for some time. That's not the behavior of people who feel safe, who feel in control. That's the behavior of people terrified of discovery, of exposure, of whatever consequences they imagined would follow if the wrong people learned the truth. Before leaving, I decided to photograph the entire hallway, documenting everything I could see. When I turned my camera toward the corner where I'd first seen the man standing the previous day, I noticed something I'd missed before in my panic. The wall bore marks, subtle impressions that you'd only notice if you were looking carefully. Hand marks, not dirty exactly, but worn, almost invisible. As if someone had leaned there repeatedly, many times throughout each day, always in the exact same position. This was a support wall, a watching post. They observed whoever climbed those stairs, whoever descended, maintaining constant surveillance. They kept shifts there, took turns monitoring the house's vulnerable points. Suddenly, a sound from downstairs cut through my thoughts like a knife. Something metallic striking slowly, deliberately, as if someone had bumped into a pot or knocked against a tin can. I paralyzed completely, every muscle locked. There was nobody with me, nobody who should be here. The upper floor had been stripped clean, but someone remained downstairs, moving through those rooms. I extinguished my flashlight immediately, plunging myself into dimness. I stood perfectly still, listening to silence that felt alive, that seemed to breathe. What would happen if at this moment you realize that you are not alone in a place that should be empty, that every sound could mean that someone is approaching without you being able to see them? ... I descended sideways, distributing my weight carefully to avoid creaking floorboards, trying to see as much as possible with only the weak light filtering through cracks in the boarded windows. When I reached the living room, moving like a ghost through my own investigation, I saw what had produced that metallic sound. The back door hung wide open, completely exposed to the overgrown yard beyond. When I approached more closely, my pulse racing, I realized it wasn't just the open door. There were two distinct footprint marks in the damp dirt floor, sharply defined and recent, heading in the opposite direction from the door, as if someone had been standing right there, watching or waiting, and then fled running when they heard my footsteps on the floor above, when they realized I'd returned. Comparte en los comentarios tu luz interior con yo. Ilumino en esos momentos oscuros, donde el miedo podría haberte paralizado, pero encontraste la fuerza para continuar, para no rendirte, ante lo desconocido, because illuminating our experiences of courage, even small acts of continuing forward when everything screams at us to flee, helps others find their own light in frightening situations. Your inner illumination might be exactly what someone needs to hear when they face their own moment of terror and must choose between paralysis and action. And beside the door, they'd dropped something small in their haste to escape. I picked it up carefully, my hands trembling as I examined what I'd found. It was an old keychain bearing the photograph of a child, a little girl, maybe 5 years old, with her hair pulled back and wearing a shy, tentative smile that broke something inside my chest. This wasn't a child from this house. Couldn't be connected to this property's history. The house had stood empty 4 years before these people arrived. That keychain didn't belong to this place, had no connection to its past. That little girl belonged to someone who had been living here, hiding here, surviving in the shadows of an abandoned property. I can't fully explain why, but that discovery filled me with a deeper despair than any face I'd seen inside that house. Any shadow or presence. People who disappear. People who flee. People who hide themselves away from the world. They all have someone, somewhere, at some point in their lives. Someone who loves them, someone who remembers them, someone whose photograph they carry as a talisman against loneliness. I walked back toward the front door, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. I needed to exit this place immediately. Needed to breathe air that didn't feel heavy with secrets and desperation. Before crossing the threshold into daylight and normalcy, I looked back at the staircase one final time, unable to help myself. The hallway stood empty, but it was that kind of emptiness that somehow feels full. Inhabited, as if the house remained occupied not by ghosts or supernatural entities, but by people who had simply chosen to disappear, to exist outside the boundaries of normal society. When the bride approached me to request a preview, wanting to see some of the photographs before the evening ended, I didn't want to show her anything. Something in my gut screamed that revealing these images would be a terrible mistake. But she insisted, told me she wanted to post something on social media that very night, wanted to share the joy of her celebration while it still felt fresh and immediate. I opened my laptop, selected one of the clearer photographs, and turned the screen toward her, watching her face carefully. Her shock was so powerful, so visceral, that her chair scraped backward across the floor as she recoiled. She brought both hands to her mouth, suddenly unable to breathe properly. Her eyes filled with tears immediately, welling up and spilling over. I genuinely thought she might collapse. Right there, might faint from the shock of what she was seeing. You have asked why some images capture more than what our eyes can see at that moment. As if the camera gave access to a reality that exists just beyond our conscious perception, the first words she managed to speak, her voice trembling and barely audible, were that the woman in the photograph was her sister. And then, with tears streaming down her face, she explained to me that her sister had died approximately 6 months earlier in a terrible car accident while driving to a party, a celebration that she never reached. And the strangest, most disturbing detail of all was that her sister had been wearing a white dress that day. Not a wedding gown, but a simple white dress, remarkably similar to the one visibly in my photographs. I tried to ask if she was absolutely certain, if there could be any possibility of mistake, but she shook her head as if I was stating something completely obvious, something that required no confirmation. Then she stood abruptly and walked away quickly, refusing to say anything more, her body language radiating distress and confusion. She went directly to the bathroom, moving through the crowd of celebrating guests like someone in a trance. The entire atmosphere of the wedding shifted in that instant, transformed from joy to something darker and more uncertain. Several people noticed her expression, the way her face had drained of color, and they began asking if something had happened, if there was an emergency. I had no idea what to tell them, how to explain what we'd just witnessed. My only coherent thought, repeating endlessly in my mind, was a desperate need to understand what existed in those photographs, what my camera had captured that shouldn't be possible. Déjame en los comentarios tu reflexión, comenzando con: yo me comprometo a sobre respetar los misterios que no tienen explicación lógica, sobre aceptar que algunas experiencias trascienden nuestra comprensión racional del mundo. Because committing to remain open to the inexplicable, to acknowledge that our understanding of reality might be incomplete, allows us to navigate these terrifying moments without losing ourselves completely to fear or denial. Your commitment to holding space for mystery might help someone else accept their own unexplainable experience without questioning their sanity. I moved closer to an electrical outlet, connected my laptop to power, and began reviewing everything again with obsessive attention to detail. With each image I opened, examining them systematically one after another. That woman appeared slightly different. Sometimes she seemed closer to the camera, more prominent in the frame. Sometimes she appeared more out of focus, as if she were moving while the shutter captured her. It followed no logical pattern, no progression that made technical sense. It seemed as though she was moving from photograph to photograph, as if she were walking through a sequence that only I could perceive, only I could understand. There was one image where she stood so close to the bride that she appeared to be touching the veil with her hand, but there had been no wind that day and the veil showed no corresponding movement or disturbance. I exported a new file, convincing myself it must be some kind of reading error, some corruption in the original data. I deleted temporary files, closed all programs, started the entire process fresh, and when I opened the newly exported images, clean files with no history, she remained there, reconstructed perfectly, identical to the previous versions. There was no way this could be a technical error, no rational explanation that fit the evidence. It was in the middle of this desperate attempt to understand what was happening, to find some logical explanation for the impossible, that I heard the scream. The bride's scream, piercing and terrified, coming from the bathroom. I abandoned everything and ran toward the sound, my heart pounding. The bridesmaids came rushing behind me, but I entered first, pushing through the door. She was collapsed on the floor, breathing rapidly in shallow gasps, her eyes focused on nothing, staring into space with an expression of pure shock. The bride fainted moments after looking at that reflection, after seeing what I was seeing, after confronting the impossible presence of her dead sister. When other people burst into the bathroom, drawn by the commotion, they found only me supporting her limp body, trying to keep her from hitting her head on the tile floor. Because in the mirror, there was nobody anymore. No reflection that shouldn't exist, and even if the figure had remained visible, nobody would have believed us, would have accepted what we'd witnessed. The wedding ended right there, terminated by forces beyond anyone's control. The guests were released, sent home with vague explanations. The groom tried to justify the situation, to provide some rational explanation for why his bride had collapsed. Everyone departed feeling confused and unsettled, sensing that something profound had occurred, but unable to understand exactly what. I remained at the venue for a while longer, slowly packing my equipment, because I didn't know how to simply leave, how to walk away from what had happened. I felt responsible somehow, guilty for having shown that photograph, even though I knew rationally I'd done nothing wrong. I'd simply been doing my job. The bride regained consciousness later, surrounded by concerned family members. They told everyone she was just nervous, overwhelmed by emotion. Nothing serious, but she avoided making eye contact with me, and I understood what that meant. It was as if she believed I had somehow brought her sister back, had summoned that presence through my photographs, had violated some boundary that should have remained sealed. The following day, I attempted to work with the photographs one final time, to somehow resolve this impossible situation. And that's when the last strange element of this story revealed itself. I tried to delete all the images where the sister appeared, every single photograph that contained her impossible presence. I made a backup first, being careful and methodical, but I wanted to see if she would vanish from the original files. I deleted them from the memory card, deleted them from my laptop's hard drive, emptied the trash folder, followed every proper procedure. When I opened the export folder to verify they were gone, they were there again. The exact same photographs with the same woman standing in the same positions, and in one of them, she appeared more sharply focused than before, more clearly defined, as if she'd been photographed in that very moment rather than during the original ceremony. I formatted the memory card completely, wiped the folder clean, restarted my computer, repeated the entire process with desperate thoroughness. They appeared again, reconstructed from nothing, persistent and undeniable. I only managed to stop the cycle after I placed an external hard drive containing all the files into a drawer, and decided never to touch it again, never to open those files or examine them further. The photographs remain there, stored in darkness, with that woman standing behind the bride exactly as she appeared that day. And sometimes I think about what would happen if I opened them now, whether she would be even more sharply focused, even more present, as if she's been waiting all this time for me to look again, waiting for the next moment when someone will finally see her clearly and understand what she wants, why she appeared, what message she was trying to deliver through my camera lens. I don't know what ultimately happened with that marriage, what conversations took place, or what decisions were made in the aftermath, but I do know they separated shortly afterward, their union dissolving under the weight of what we'd witnessed. And the bride's family never wanted contact with me again, not out of anger or resentment, but out of pure fear, the kind that settles deep in your bones. It was as if I had seen something that nobody should ever see, had crossed some invisible boundary that separated the living world from whatever exists beyond it. So many times. I still dream about that expression on her face, the sister's face staring directly into the camera lens, those empty eyes, as if it had never been my place to show those photographs to anyone, as if that smile she wore in some of the images was merely the beginning of something far more complex and disturbing. And there's one detail I've never shared with another living soul, but I need to put it here. Need to release it into the world before it drives me to complete madness. The last time I opened that folder, just before locking the external hard drive away in darkness, there was a photograph I had absolutely no memory of taking. The same woman wearing the same simple white dress, except in this image she stood positioned directly behind me, and I am looking straight at the camera as if someone else had pressed the shutter button while I was unpaying attention, while I was distracted or unaware. The composition made no sense, violated every principle of how photography actually works when you're shooting alone. I only remember the sound of footsteps, low and deliberate, firm against whatever surface they contacted, as if the person creating them knew exactly where to place each foot to avoid making excessive noise, to maintain stealth and concealment. I remained completely motionless, frozen in my bed, trying desperately to understand if what I was hearing made any logical sense, if there could be some innocent explanation. And the first thought that crystallized in my terrified mind was devastatingly simple. There's someone inside this apartment who shouldn't be here, someone who doesn't belong. For several long seconds, I didn't have the courage to breathe deeply, to take in air normally. The overwhelming sensation was that if I made any movement whatsoever, whoever lurked out there in the darkness would perceive that I was awake, would know I was aware of their presence. And I felt certain of one fundamental truth that settled like ice in my chest. This person, whoever they were, was not my friend, had no benign purpose for being here. Now I need to explain how everything reached this terrifying point, because looking backward with a clarity hindsight provides all the pieces were right in front of my face the entire time, obvious signs I'd chosen to ignore or rationalize away. I was living with a friend who belonged to that category of people who naturally enchant everyone they encounter. Extraordinarily likable, always laughing, perpetually armed with entertaining stories to share. At the time I genuinely believed she was simply sociable, naturally gifted at connecting with others. Only later did I realize she chose very carefully what she revealed and concealed everything else. Behind that charming facade, constructing a persona that hid her true nature and intentions, life in our shared apartment proceeded smoothly, unremarkably, until she began dating an older man who possessed considerable wealth, the kind of money that changes how people move through the world. Initially, I paid little attention to their relationship. It seemed normal enough that he would visit frequently, order food with us, stay to talk and laugh. But soon I started noticing strange things, small details that accumulated into a disturbing pattern. He paid far too much attention to our physical environment, studying the space with intensity that went beyond casual observation. At first, I rationalized it as some professional quirk, perhaps the habits of an architect or designer evaluating structures. But one day I arrived home from work and found him standing motionless in our living room, staring at the service area door as if he were measuring the distance, calculating something I couldn't understand. How many times have you ignored the warning signs because you wanted to believe that everything was fine? Because recognizing the danger would mean confronting a terrifying truth about someone you trust. ... Another time he asked out of nowhere what time I typically arrived home from university classes, what my usual schedule looked like. It wasn't relevant to any conversation we were having, had no connection to the topic at hand. He just inserted that question casually into our dialogue, as if mentally noting the information for future reference. And there were those quick glances toward my belongings, my keys, my purse, my shoes positioned near the door. It felt like he was memorizing everything, cataloging the details of my life and routines with disturbing As time progressed, my friend began making unusual requests that seemed innocuous individually but formed a concerning pattern when viewed together. One evening, she asked me to leave the apartment door merely pushed closed rather than properly locked, because she feared waking me when she returned late from wherever she was going. Another day, she requested I not secure the living room window because it would get very windy overnight and she wanted ventilation. I even asked why she was suddenly so concerned about the noise of doors and windows. What had changed to make these things matter? But she just laughed and dismissed it as one of her quirks. Nothing significant. Then came the truly bizarre favors. The requests that should have alarmed me immediately. Escribe en los comentarios una intención que empiece con yo decido. And sobre escuchar tus instintos. Cuando algo se siente peligroso. Sobre no ignorar esas voces internas que te advierten del peligro real. Because deciding to honor those survival instincts, to act on feelings of unease before they become moments of genuine crisis, might save your life or the life of someone you love. Your decision to trust your inner warning system could inspire someone else to take action before it is too late. When you arrive home late, send me a message just so I know it's not some stranger entering, she said one evening, her tone casual, but her eyes avoiding mine. I found it odd. Couldn't quite understand the logic, but I complied with her request. Except there was one detail that genuinely disturbed me, that planted seeds of real concern. One afternoon, I came home and immediately noticed that the circuit breaker had been switched off, plunging the entire apartment into powerless silence. She explained it was accidental, that she'd been replacing a burned-out light bulb and accidentally touched the switch. In that moment, I believed her explanation, accepted it as truth. But afterward, that incident kept hammering in my mind, refusing to be dismissed or forgotten. Her boyfriend started appearing when she wasn't home, violating the normal boundaries of visiting someone's residence. I would arrive and find him there alone in our living room, sitting comfortably as if he belonged. He'd explain he was waiting for her to return from errands or appointments, but she never warned me he'd be there, never mentioned his presence beforehand. One night, they argued intensely in our kitchen, their voices rising despite obvious attempts at control. I heard harsh whispers, his voice laden with irritation, her voice pleading with him to lower his tone because I was in my bedroom, because I might hear. I caught only one phrase clearly, one sentence that pierced through their attempted discretion. She needs to be here, he said, and my stomach dropped sickeningly. I didn't understand the full context, couldn't piece together what they were planning, but I knew with absolute certainty they were discussing me, making decisions about my life without my knowledge or consent. On the night I heard those footsteps, that terrible night that confirmed all my worst fears, I woke in total darkness, complete and absolute. Initially, I assumed only my bedside lamp had been turned off, that I'd simply forgotten to leave it on. But when I pressed the light switch, nothing happened. No glow, no illumination. I tested the hallway switch, reaching out in darkness. Nothing responded. Only then did I realize the circuit breaker had been deactivated again, that we were without power throughout the entire apartment. Except this time, I knew with chilling certainty that this wasn't any accident, wasn't some innocent mistake or coincidence. The footsteps approached slowly, deliberately, and I could hear that subtle friction of feet dragging slightly across our floor tiles, the whisper of movement through darkness. And there was another detail that froze my blood in my veins, that confirmed my worst suspicions. They didn't collide with the coat rack or the living room table. Nothing fell or clattered. Whoever walked through our home in complete darkness knew the layout intimately, had memorized every obstacle and pathway. I sat upright in my bed, clutching my phone without activating the screen. Without giving away my wakefulness through any source of light, could only listen to the sounds coming from the hallway, then from the living room, then approaching near the kitchen. And then, suddenly, silence descended. A silence so heavy and oppressive it felt like the person had stopped moving specifically to listen as well. To detect any sign of my awareness, I felt an overwhelming urge to cry, to release the terror building in my chest. But I forced it down, swallowed it. I understood that any sound whatsoever might reveal that I was awake, that I was conscious and aware of the intrusion. I just wanted it to end, wanted morning to arrive and rescue me from this nightmare. A few seconds later, seconds that stretched like hours in that suffocating darkness, I heard the service area door open slowly, its hinges creaking softly. I felt a current of cold air pass beneath my bedroom door, flowing from that newly opened exit, and then the footsteps faded gradually, diminishing as if the person were departing through the back way, leaving the same way they'd presumably entered, disappearing into whatever darkness had spawned them. I do not know how long I stood there paralyzed before I mustered the courage to turn on my cell phone to illuminate the floor. I slowly left the room, with the light from my cell phone pointing ahead. The circuit breaker was off, but it wasn't loose like the last time. It was held down with electrical tape. That ended any doubt. Everything in that house had been prepared. The unlocked window, the ajar door, the memorized schedules, the rehearsed route. The next day, my friend arrived early, nervous, asking if I had seen anything strange. I said the circuit breaker had tripped. She froze for a second. It was quick, but I saw it that summer day. I packed my things and left without giving an explanation. She tried to insist that I stay, said everything was fine, that I was exaggerating, but the way she reacted seemed more like panic than concern. Weeks later, a mutual acquaintance told me that she had broken up with her boyfriend. He said there was a serious problem involving him and some friends. They didn't give details, but I know what was going on there. I know because when you add it all up, there's no other logic. My friend was preparing the apartment for a planned robbery, and I would be the perfect element. If I didn't see anything, I would just be the sleeping witness. If I did see something, maybe I would become something else. To this day, when I hear footsteps in the building's hallway at night, my body freezes in the same way. It's not movie trauma. It is the memory of knowing that someone walked into my house that night with the feeling of having permission, and that I was never warned about it. I could swear that someone was next to me in bed that night. It wasn't my imagination or a dream. The mattress really sank very slowly, as if a small body had climbed up the side. The first thing that froze me was the exact weight, that gentle descent of the fabric, just like when my son lies down next to me, except his room was through the other door, and I had locked everything before going to sleep. I was completely still. My breathing became short, the kind that scratches your throat. I tried to turn to look, but my body wouldn't allow it. The feeling was that if I moved my head, something would touch my face. There was no noise, no wind, nothing, just the weight, the exact weight of someone lying down. It took me a few seconds to be able to breathe again. The sensation slowly disappeared, as if that thing had slipped off the bed. I got up automatically and went straight to my son's room. He was sleeping on his stomach, breathing heavily, in that deep way that children do when they fall asleep. At that moment, I still tried to convince myself that maybe it was just tiredness. I had moved recently. Old house, smell of old wood, that silence that crackles when there is no movement at all. But the following night, at the same time, the mattress sank again. In the same way, the same child's weight. Only this time, it wasn't so light. It seemed stronger, as if it had grown. I felt it first, near my legs, as if someone was climbing onto the bed. My whole body went cold. Even my scalp seemed to shrink. I pulled the blanket up to my chest and closed my eyes tightly, but I could still feel the weight settle beside me. The mattress formed that belly, that exact outline of a body lying down. The thing was breathing. It was a short, somewhat restrained breath, as if it were scared or cold. I only remember the air becoming heavy, almost stifling, and suddenly a hand grabbed my shirt from behind very slowly. It didn't pull, it just gripped, as if it were afraid I would leave. In that moment, I didn't think of anything but my son. I got up with an impulse. I don't even know where it came from. The cold hand let go immediately. The bed returned to normal, too quickly, to be natural. I ran to his room, still sleeping soundly, without having moved. From then on, the routine became hell. There wasn't a single night when I slept peacefully. Everything always happened at the same time. Las 12:17, it wasn't to 15, nor to 20, always to 17. First the mattress would sink, then came the breath near my neck, and on certain nights I would hear a muffled whimpering sound in the pillow, as if the child were trying to hide their crying. I tried changing positions. I tried leaving the light on. I tried sleeping on the sofa. It always found me. But the worst night was the third week after the move. The sinking started heavier than ever, as if someone had thrown themselves onto the bed. I felt the blanket rise beside me, and before I could back away, something pulled it back forcefully. A force that made no sense for the size it seemed to have. The message was clear. Stay lying down. The sound of the fabric being pulled startled me so much that I lost my balance when I tried to get up. I fell to the side, hit my shoulder on the floor, and still managed to jump up. The bed was normal, without any marks, nothing out of place, but I could still feel the hand on my shirt, as if the touch had stuck there. It was only that night that I decided to go up to the attic. I had avoided it since moving in because the place was full of dust, smelled of musty things, and had cobwebs in the wood gaps. The house was very old, one of those built with thick planks and a ceiling that creaks even when you take a deep breath. But something told me there was an answer upstairs. I went up with my cell phone in hand, using the flashlight, because the attic light wasn't working. The air was hot and still. It seemed like no one had opened that space in decades. In the left corner, near some boxers torn by time, there was a very old leather suitcase with worn edges. Right there I felt a tightness in my chest. The suitcase was closed with a crooked little belt. When I lifted the lid, the dust rose in a clump. Inside were children's clothes, old-fashioned things. A t-shirt with a crocheted collar, small shorts, folded socks, all smelling musty. There was also an envelope with documents that were only half burned. I couldn't read everything, but I could first see a boy's name and a piece of a date. My hands started to tremble when I picked up the last thing inside, a photo. The photo was kind of blurry, kind of out of focus, as if it had gotten wet at some point. It was the face of a sleeping boy, his skin fair, his hair short. He was lying on an old bed, the same bed where I slept today. That image made me feel so nauseous that I sat on the floor with the photo in my hands. The feeling I had was that that boy had never left that house, or that they had never let him go. I went down from the attic without closing the suitcase and left everything there. I didn't have the courage to touch anything else. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my son's room, with my back to the wall, waiting for dawn. But what struck me most wasn't the photo, it was the silence of the room that night. For the first time, at 2:17, the mattress didn't sink. There was no weight, no breathing, no crying, nothing.